Hi, I'm Stacey Anderson, also known as the Super Gene. Having lived in 9 cities across 3 continents and counting, Super Gene Unleashed features people from around the world sharing their unfiltered versions of female empowerment. With a 20-year global career in digital marketing, operating as a leader and mentor, and now as a wife and mother of 3, I encourage you to unleash your own Super Gene and become the most empowered version of yourself. Here's your advocate, ally, and confidant. I am ready to inspire you. Let's show the world what it's all about. Welcome back, my fellow Super Genes. If you're someone who has ever worried about your fertility now or at any point in the future, then this episode is for you. Today, we're talking about what actually impacts fertility, why IVF is not the only path forward, and what women can start doing right now to protect and improve their reproductive health. We're also diving into something that rarely gets attention, and that is why fertility is not just a woman's issue, and why so many women are made to carry the weight of this alone. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how your hormones, gut health, and lifestyle are connected to your fertility, and why taking a functional whole body approach can really make all the difference. And here's why this conversation matters so much. Globally, fertility is declining, and it's not just in women. Research actually shows that the average sperm counts worldwide have dropped by more than 50% over the last 4 decades, a trend that continues today. Fertility challenges are rising across all regions, all ages, and across both genders. Yet, despite this, women are still made to feel like fertility struggles are just theirs alone to fix. And that's exactly what we're unpacking today. Today, I'm joined by Sandra Sharpe, who is a certified functional nutrition practitioner, prenatal nutrition specialist, and functional medicine health coach. Sandra works with women around the world using a functional root cause approach to fertility, helping women and even men understand their bodies, their hormones, and their options beyond the traditional narrative. So Sandra, welcome to Super Gene Unleashed. I'd really love to start at the beginning. Please tell us, how did you first become interested in fertility and hormone health? Was it something that was personal or professional?
Thank you so much. First of all, hello, everybody. And thank you so much, Stacey, for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk about this. Obviously, this is what I talk about every day. And I love that we're having more of these conversations and reaching more people. So my journey kind of started, well, I've been a coach and I've been coaching in women's health for close to 10 years now. And I mainly started in overall women's health. So I was really working with women around a functional approach still, but mostly around balancing hormones and working on cycle health. And through that work, I started seeing a trend where a lot of the work that we were doing was helping women get pregnant, and that just became like a pattern that we were seeing because obviously women were at that stage where they were also trying to get pregnant, but we were working on the foundational aspects of helping them get pregnant and have healthy pregnancies. And several of my clients that I worked with at the beginning of my journey, so many of them started getting pregnant. And it wasn't until I became a mother myself and I went through a really difficult time, sort of postpartum after my first pregnancy. I had a very relatively easy pregnancy. I personally didn't, thankfully, have any fertility issues per se, but I had a really terrible postpartum. And it was also like in the middle of the pandemic. I got kind of thrown into motherhood in a way that I really wasn't well prepared for, even though I thought, I'm a coach, I'm healthy, I relatively take care of myself, but I really wasn't prepared for the mental and emotional load that we are not really well prepared for when we become mothers. And I think until you've been in that position, I felt like it was really hard to explain to someone, what it felt like. But I really wanted to work in that space and I wanted to help women understand the transition into motherhood, but more importantly, how the preparation before getting pregnant not only helps you get pregnant, have a healthy pregnancy, but also have a really healthy postpartum period and recovery. And so I kind of got into this work first professionally, but then it became really personal for me as soon as I became a mother. But then I also went through a really difficult time between pregnancies because I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in between pregnancies. And I also went through a miscarriage. So that sort of 2-year period or 3-year period between pregnancies was a really transformative time in my life, both personally and professionally, because it kind of opened my eyes to, okay, well, I'm someone who advocates all the time about health and taking care of your body and all these foundational things. And, I try to practice what I preach and all of that. But then I got diagnosed with cancer, and then I went through a miscarriage. And so I started doing a lot more deeper diving into my health, into the underlying chronic conditions that women go through. I've had a long-standing thyroid issue, and that was obviously, one of the things in between pregnancies that was something I really had to factor in and really hone in on. But also there were so many other things around birth trauma and emotional healing and the fear around motherhood, because as much as we want and hope and wish to become mothers, for those of us that do want to become mothers, we also aren't prepared for the kind of catapult into a whole different dynamic in your life and really kind of like relearning who you are and this identity crisis that we kind of go through. And I truly feel like all of those things and my physical well-being were all kind of the thing that I would say was a big reason why I miscarried. And when I kind of sat back after that miscarriage, and I was very vocal about it on social media, I shared it. And I think that was also a turning point, because when I shared it and I was so vulnerable about it, the amount of messages I got thousands of women literally reaching out to me on all different platforms, telling me like, me too, this was my story, this was my story, this was my story. And I was like, wow, why aren't we talking about this? This is huge. And that was really a transformative period, like I said, because I realized how fragmented this information around fertility and pregnancy and postpartum really was. And we weren't given the right information, conclusive information. And it was a section of women's health. Like, I feel like women's health in general is something that, again, there's not enough research. It's still, we're just starting to talk about, all the conditions that women go through, but even more so in the fertility space, because for such a vulnerable and sacred transition for a woman, we're barely scratching the surface. And like you said, the pressure that women feel to do it right and get it done in a certain time, and, all of these things, I think adds to the struggles. So it was kind of like this combination of things that happened professionally and personally that really made me feel like, okay, no, I want to pivot in my business. And I really want to hone in on supporting women and couples through this journey, because this is pivotal. And with the statistics that you said, like the fertility crisis is getting worse and worse and worse, and it's projected to get even worse. So it's up to us to really shift our approach to fertility care and how we're educating both men and women around the responsibility of preconception care, because it's not just about getting pregnant and becoming parents. It's also about having healthier pregnancies, having healthier babies. And it's a very transgenerational approach to fertility and women's health.
First of all, thank you so much for being so vulnerable with everybody and so open with your own journey. I certainly can understand that for many people, it can be difficult to talk about such hard times in life. So I really appreciate that you are so honest and open with the community about what you faced firsthand. And I think that that also lends so much credibility to you as a coach within this space, because you have had a front row seat to actually going through trials and tribulations in your own journey. And you touched on so many points that I really think are so important to this conversation that I just want to reiterate to everybody. And that is that it's not just about having the baby, it's about having the healthy baby, a healthy pregnancy, but also that the woman is supported in the postpartum journey. And honestly, you struck a deep emotional chord with me, and I can immediately relate because the first time that I became a mother, it was an enormity of change for me to take on. And you're completely right that there's not so much out there in terms of support to prepare a woman for what that feels like physically, but more importantly, emotionally. And although someone can kind of recount what it is, until you go through it for yourself, it's really hard to understand that. And it is life changing. In fact, for the woman, I feel it's almost more intense than for a man because your body has changed. If you're breastfeeding, or even if you're not breastfeeding, it can take a toll on you. And you feel so much inherent need to take care of the baby. When the baby is born, it's just biologically rooted in us. And it's so hard because you go from being an individual to all of a sudden having a baby completely reliant on you. And it is really hard to adapt. So I want to shift gears a little bit more to your practice because you brought up a lot of important points about taking that functional, holistic approach. And just in simple terms for the audience today, if they're not familiar with that, how can you explain what that means in terms of taking a functional whole body approach to fertility?
Right. So when we talk about functional fertility care, I try to avoid using the word root cause so much because I feel like it's thrown around all the time now in the, health and wellness space. But it really is, fertility essentially it's an extension of your overall health, right? It is not a switch that you turn on when you're ready to have a baby. You're like, okay, now I'm going to turn my fertility on. That's not how it works. It's obviously an extension of our overall health. And we as women, obviously, we are biologically made and designed to reproduce. Whether you want children or not, your body is trying to get pregnant every single month, right? So when everything in your body, and of course, factors from your partner's health as well, are working, there should be no barriers. There should be no, barriers to reproduction, and reproduction happens. But we often also underestimate or not, we don't pay attention, or we don't kind of grasp the idea that fertility happens when your body is safe, when your body is well fed, when your body is, when your metabolic health is optimal, when your ovulation is regular, when your immune system is robust and healthy and can support implantation. When you have enough energy, because pregnancy and conception, they depend on a lot of energy availability. And, a lot of women are depleted nowadays. Making sure that there's no inflammation in the body, making sure that your digestive health is optimal and your thyroid signaling is optimal. These are all important things for you and your health. And in order for your reproductive system to actually function, it depends on all of these systems. And when something so natural and biologically meant to be doesn't happen, then we don't force it. We have to ask, why isn't it working? Because you were made to reproduce, right? That's how your body doesn't make mistakes. It's just trying to signal to you that if there is an issue getting pregnant or staying pregnant, we have to shift perspective and start thinking about, okay, well, what actually supports our bodies to reproduce? And fertility, and that's why I say fertility is an extension of your overall health, because it's all of these systems working together and how they all connect to then support you conceiving and having a healthy pregnancy. And it's such an incredible process in the body. And obviously, it's not just your body, it's also your partner's body and his health. But it's really amazing once you start to understand like all the things that we're doing on a daily basis and how that feeds into that system, that complexity of your biology, and how that then lends to reproductive health. And one thing that I really want to emphasize is that reproduction is not a priority for your body, right? Survival is. So when there are different things external and internally that are stressing your body, reproduction is put on the back burner. No, your body doesn't care that you have a baby, but it cares that you stay alive and you stay healthy. So I think we also need to understand that because you're having issues getting pregnant, it's not because your body's broken or there's a problem with it. It's actually a message to you to sit down and kind of like take inventory, okay, of what's happening, and to get that support where someone can literally look at your health history, look at your labs in context, and say, okay, now I can understand why there's different factors or why these different factors are impacting your fertility and why it's taking so long to get pregnant, or why you're not staying pregnant, or why you're having complications in your pregnancies, or whatever it is. So that's where functional fertility really shines, because it's not about taking over or overshadowing the medical system. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to marry both together. And functional fertility, or the approach from a functional perspective, is really to fill in the gaps where conventional care has kind of fallen short. And we see a pattern over and over again where women and couples are being told that, they have unexplained infertility, that there's no hope for them, that they just need to go straight to IVF. And they're just being fear-mongered. They are, given no hope, no reassurance, no clarity, no answers to something that is so biologically natural, right? So this is, again, where functional fertility really shines, because what we do is we look at the same blood work, but we look at way more comprehensive lab work. We look at numbers from an optimal perspective versus a normal perspective, which is what conventional medicine does. And we can dive into all of these in more detail if you want. But we also look at functional testing. So functional testing goes like way deeper into how your body's actually functioning. So we look at things like stool analyses to check your gut microbiome. We look at comprehensive, saliva and urine panels that go into a really, detailed look into your hormones and your hormone metabolites and how your body's actually using hormones and metabolizing hormones. And we look at, things like your vaginal microbiome, your endometrial microbiome. We look at mycotoxin tests. So there's a huge variety of different functional tests that we work with clients, depending on their case and depending on where they are in their journey. And then I think one of the most important differentiating factors between functional fertility and the approach to conventional is that we can absolutely support you through things like IVF, but we would never promote that as the only option, because IVF is a tool and it's a great option and it helps so many women and couples who really need it. But I feel like it is so prematurely pushed onto couples when they absolutely can get pregnant naturally. It's just about sitting down with them and zooming out and understanding what's actually going on underneath the surface. And again, this is where functional fertility really, we kind of act like detectives, right? Like we're sitting there kind of investigating your case to see what are the underlying factors. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing and patterns that we're seeing is women who are underfueling. This is across the board. Women are not eating enough to support fertility and healthy pregnancies, but also how little emphasis is put on nervous system regulation, emotional trauma, physical trauma, birth traumas. Like there's a wide range of emotional and mental barriers, even the things like just fear of pregnancy, fear of how your body's going to change, fear of motherhood, fear of the unknown. Like that is a huge topic in and of itself, where when you actually sit with a client and you start asking them questions, all of these, it's like peeling the onion layer, and we get more and more insight into these mental and emotional barriers that either the system has created for them or they've created for themselves. And this is a huge piece of our work that I feel truly shifts the needle in fertility success and the success of our clients in my practice.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there are so many aspects that you take into consideration. And one of the things that you said really struck a chord with me, and that was about unexplained infertility.
Hmm.
And I know people in my circle where they have been told that. I can actually think of somebody in my circle that I know that was told that, and she believes that she, had to go through IVF. But generally speaking, I feel like so many people around me that have gotten pregnant, they have gone the IVF route, and they were pretty much told that you need to immediately go the IVF route. So that's what I want to ask you next is, first of all, like, is it true that women can just have infertility that is unexplainable? And then secondly, what are the most common misconceptions that women have about fertility when they come to you? And, just generally, why do you think that this whole label can be so misleading? Because you gave a really scientific and, biological explanation about human species and how we're
Yeah.
designed to procreate. So that doesn't really go in line with what doctors and, people are actually telling women and men who are trying to conceive.
I think it is a really frustrating diagnosis. It's also a rubbish diagnosis because it's lazy medicine. There unexplained infertility, it's never unexplained. It's just literally unexplored. You haven't asked the right questions, you haven't done enough research or gotten enough data or gotten enough lab work. You haven't dug deeper to figure out what's going on. And I, like 9 times out of 10, this is what I hear from clients. They've been told it's the same pattern. I've got unexplained infertility. I've been told I need to go through IVF. I've got no other option. But it's like, okay, show me your lab work. Red flag, red flag, red flag, like, why is nobody looking at this? And the problem is that there's also issues with the conventional system where the ranges for lab work are really wide. So unless you're sick enough to treat, they don't pay attention to it, right? But normal ranges doesn't mean that your body is functioning optimally. That's where we need to kind of start to pay attention to lab work and really look at the difference between what's normal and what's optimal. You don't want to be normal because that doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy. And you're being compared, when you're being told that everything's normal, you're being compared to the general population, and the general population is getting sicker and sicker. So you don't want to be normal. You want to be in optimal ranges. I mean, we see this time and time and time again. And I think it's the most common diagnosis that I hear from all my clients is that I've got unexplained infertility. I've been pushed to IVF. Some women kind of hesitate at that and they're like, no, I don't think that doesn't make sense to me. And others are panicked, out of the fear and like, well, I've got no other option. I have to quickly rush because I'm, in my late 30s or I'm in my early 40s. I've, all these risks that I've been told. And I get that there are aspects of that are true. But why are we scaring women? Like, we've helped women conceive naturally well into their 40s. And these were women that were told you have unexplained infertility, you have low AMH, your only option is to do IVF. There's no other option, and you're 43, so there's no way that you can conceive naturally and have a healthy baby. That was one of my clients. And she
Wow.
was 43 years old. And she came to me, and I remember she was crying on her discovery call. And she was like, you are my last hope. I've got no other chance, and I will not entertain IVF. So if this doesn't work, I'm done. I'm not going to try anymore. And she was going through secondary infertility. So she already had a baby. And she already had a healthy pregnancy, and she's being told that your body can't do it anymore.
Oh,
She's like, but I've already
wow.
done that.
What?
Yeah, exactly. So this is where it's like, what? How are women being told this? And within 4 months, so she was trying for 2 years. Within 4 months, she was pregnant. She carried a very healthy pregnancy, and she just delivered her baby at 44 years old, naturally, had a very healthy pregnancy. And yeah, she just delivered her baby
Oh,
literally like
that's
last month.
amazing. That
Yeah.
is,
So,
those stories have to make you feel really good
oh,
and also
absolutely.
give you more gusto to keep going in your field,
Absolutely.
because it shows that what you're doing works and that women don't need to be feeling hopeless or have despair and think that, IVF is the only option. You've just proven it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, if you think about it, like technically, infertility, the word infertility is actually so wrong because the the percentage of people that are actually infertile is like 1 to 2% globally, where they're actually infertile, like sterile. And that in and of itself is just a completely misleading word. So it's actually subfertility, which is technically more correct.
Well, and infertility is also it can carries a heavy
Feels,
emotional
yeah,
load. When you say it,
absolutely.
it could really hurt somebody in a deep way and make you feel inadequate.
Absolutely. And we can't women going through fertility struggles and couples going through this, they navigate this with it's really heavy to navigate, and nobody is paying attention to the emotional toll that the words that they're listening to, how that breaks them and makes them feel defeated. And that in and of itself is a factor in their fertility journey that's preventing their body doesn't feel safe when it hears constantly being told, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. Then you're going to start believing, I can't do it, something's
Yep.
broken in my body. And so this is where it's just so harmful to be walking into clinics and offices where your doctor just blatantly goes, and I've heard some heard some crazy stories about, things that women are being told from doctors, and it's actually really, really upsetting.
That's really horrible to hear. And that's actually why I want to shift gears because, again, we talked about how women are made to carry this load and often they're suffering in silence. So, why do you think that fertility is still framed as a woman's responsibility? And, what are some of the most common factors that actually impact male fertility that you wish was, called into the spotlight just a little bit more so that we could also bring men into the conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, like historically, I think reproductive health was always kind of developed and framed around the female body because it's the woman that carries the baby, right? So the onus was always put on the female because we're the ones that physically carry the baby, give birth to the baby. And there's always this thinking that like it's on us, what we eat and how we perform and how we feel and all of that stuff. Our health impacts the health of the baby. And that is so outdated and so unfair. And the fact that the medical system is still putting that pressure on the woman, I do feel like we are kind of shifting in that space. And there is more conversation, and there definitely are more partners that are aware of their responsibility, which is amazing. But we have got a lot of work to do. And with this kind of framework, women, like you said, end up carrying the physical, emotional, mental load. And they're doing this while they're also living their life. They're mothering, they're working, they're traveling, they're having to go through their day-to-day life, holding this mental and emotional load of trying to conceive. And it's a lot. And a lot of it is not shared verbally. People don't talk about it. It's not carried. The responsibility is not carried by their male partners because, again, there's a lack of education around male factor fertility and how much it actually impacts the health of your pregnancy and the health of the baby. So more and more studies are coming out. Like you said at the beginning of the episode, there are staggering statistics. It's really kind of scary how sperm health is absolutely plummeting. And it's gone down, like you said, by 50% in the last 4 decades, which is crazy. And that number is projected to increase. So if we are going at this same sort of trajectory, by 2045, there will be like 0 sperm, which is crazy. So we are kind of in a fertility crisis where we need to start talking a lot more about male health and male factor fertility. What these men are putting on their bodies, their toxin exposure, their access to heat and saunas and radiation from their phones, from their laptops that are on their laps and in their pockets, their diet, which has been terrible, drinking, smoking, like all of this stuff, all this negligence in their health as well has contributed to issues with their sperm health and this decline in sperm health. We are seeing across the board, and this is like just in my practice, but I think, I can speak kind of generally, is that we have a lot of men who are either smoking or vaping. And that is just like, there's no room for that in the fertility world. You cannot smoke or vape or do anything like that, or recreational drugs or anything, because it is the number one factor that absolutely destroys sperm health.
Wow. I had no idea that smoking impacted sperm health to that degree.
Yeah, major. So there's literally no room for that. So we've had smokers come into my practice who have been smoking for 30 years. And so that is a whole load in and of itself to try and get a guy to stop smoking. So they had to see therapists, they had to do like hypnosis, some of them. But we were like, if you want a baby, you've got to stop right now. There's no negotiation around this. It's not like it's cold turkey.
Really done. Quickly, does a woman who smokes?
Absolutely, yeah. Smoking
is that also a factor? Is it on both sides?
Both sides, yeah. But for men, we're seeing that a lot more men are smokers who are still trying to like navigate a fertility journey. And women have done a lot of these changes. Like they've stopped smoking. They know that smoking is detrimental to their egg quality, to their fertility. They can't obviously smoke during a pregnancy. So I think that awareness is much more advanced in the female population. But I think with men, because they still think that like their sperm comes and does their sperm does its job and then that's done, right? And that's so not true, because they have such a huge responsibility. It's 50% of the DNA is from the male, right? So,
exactly.
Your child's health depends on your health. And a lot of the DNA is shared, is obviously passed down to the baby. But also, there are so many studies now that show that the health of their sperm will impact the health of a woman's placenta, the health of her pregnancy, and the rate of how she miscarries. So the sperm health can actually impact how much a woman miscarries as well.
Wow.
So there is a huge responsibility from the male's side as well to fix their health, look at, the nutrients that they're getting from their diet. And honestly, a lot of the guys that we work with, their health is abysmal. It's, their diets are terrible. They're not taking care of their health. They're not sleeping well because they work really long hours. A lot of them have very sedentary lives. So they're not moving much. They're not training, and they're not building muscle, which obviously helps, with their testosterone levels, which obviously helps with their sperm health. So there's a lot of factors from a male side that we need to work on. And I would say the biggest things that we see are toxin exposure from products that they're using, smoking, alcohol, which again is huge, and then their nutrition, which is like across the board, just really bad.
Yeah. So when you first start working with a woman, because I would assume that mostly women come to you.
Yeah.
My instinct is that maybe men are not as forthcoming to be a part of the process. So when women come to you, do you immediately then involve the men as part of your protocol?
Yeah. So anytime, unless there's of course a case where, just to give you an example, we have a case that we're working with right now where the guy has unfortunately been diagnosed with a really terrible case of cancer. He's had to freeze his sperm, and she's going to go through IVF because obviously they can't conceive naturally. So in that case, we are working primarily with her because obviously he's got a huge medical team that he's working with. We don't want to interfere with anything from a medical perspective, obviously, and that's pretty out of our scope. So what we can do is help him a little bit on his nutrition, just make sure that he's, working on his nutrition, but we are primarily working with her. So there are some cases where we are just working with the woman. There's also been cases where the women have decided to go through a donor sperm situation where they're single and they're getting older and they want to do this on their own. So we've helped a few women that way. But the majority of women that come in from the get-go, we will say, how is your husband feeling about this? Have you spoken to your husband? Does he know that this is obviously, a journey that you're going to be doing together? And a lot of them say yes. And, a lot of them have very supportive husbands, which is great. But we do have a number of cases where the husband is very resistant. We get, a lot of conversations with the men are like, well, how can you help me? You're not a doctor. And so there's this very misconception about the importance of foundational stuff versus going to a doctor, because for men, as they are such logical thinkers, they want numbers, they want stats, they want, tangible results that they can see like right now. And a lot of them aren't patient enough to be like, well, let's see, let's focus on nutrition and let's focus on your mental health and lifestyle factors and all of these things. They don't realize the importance of that. So there's a lot of, from my end, I get on calls with these couples and I also have to present to the guys like, look, these are the statistics of how male factor fertility plays a role. These are the statistics of fertility issues. Based on our results, this is our success statistics and our success rate, and this is what you can expect. So you have to kind of present it to them in this very logical way. And to the women, you have to kind of approach it from the more emotional side, because I get what they're going through. But I also understand that there's this lack of education and awareness from the male's perspective. But once you start explaining that and they realize how much responsibility they have, their whole perspective shifts. And we've seen that time and time again in couples. And it's actually amazing to see how they kind of completely come around and start really doing the work.
Oh, yeah. Well, it takes two to tango.
It definitely takes two. So
you need two to make a baby.
Yeah,
but actually, you brought up something that I've also seen becoming more common, and that is women who are choosing to go about having a child on their own. And you brought up how even if a woman or a couple is going through IVF, you still have a place in supporting them. Can you detail that out a little bit about why would it be important for somebody to enlist your services alongside IVF?
This is a really great question, and oftentimes a subject that, again, is misunderstood. So IVF is not a guarantee. There is no guarantee in IVF. It's a powerful tool and it's amazing, but there is no replacement for preparation. IVF has a very high failure rate. And what we're seeing is a lot of women who are going through 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds of IVF. And that is like so hard on their bodies, physically, emotionally, financially. I mean, it's a huge investment as well. And without the right preparation, if your body is not in a good place, IVF is likely not to work, because it takes the best of what you have currently. And if what you have currently is lots of inflammation and chronic conditions and suboptimal thyroid issues and blood sugar dysregulation and all of that stuff, that all impacts your egg quality and sperm quality. And so IVF will pick the best of what you can offer. And if the best of what you can offer is not that great, it's likely not going to work. And what happens then is people are then just prompted to go, well, then let's just try another round. Well, then let's just try another round, But if we're not changing the parameters, then how is the outcome going to change? And we see this all the time with clients that come to me that are like, I've been trying for 5 years. I've done 10 rounds of IVF. And I'm like, what? How does nobody take a pause to think, well, why isn't this working? Right? And that's the thing, like IVF does not override health issues. It will just take the best of what you've got. And so this is where preparation really comes into play and is so critical. Whether you are trying for natural conception or whether you're trying through medical intervention, preconception prep is key. And it's no longer like an extra or something fancy to do. This is pivotal work for the success of this journey. And you can actually improve your IVF success rates by about 30 to 40% if you do the right preparation. If you take 3 to 4 months to really focus on your overall health, egg and sperm quality, and understanding what barriers could actually stop IVF from happening, you are doing yourself a huge, service, and it's going to massively help your journey.
Oh, for sure. And that's remarkable to hear. And I love the way that you framed it about, the people that are doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, there's that quote, right? About doing the same thing over and over again is insanity when you're expecting a different result. And I like the way that you framed it because it is a very scientific look. If you keep all the variables the same, then the outcome will probably be the same. So it's good to test these different hypotheses. And, fortunately, you have proven that these methodologies work. So for the woman who's listening that wants to be proactive, what are some of the most impactful steps that they can take today to support their fertility? And also, when should she start thinking about it? Because there's so many women as well that are choosing to delay the fertility journey. There are women who I've come across that have waited until they were 40 to freeze their eggs and wish that they had done it sooner. So, if you can just share a little bit of wisdom with the audience about what they can do to be proactive about it, as well as when they should start thinking about it.
Yeah. So, in terms of when to start thinking about it, I think much earlier than we are taught to think about it. Ideally in your 20s and early 30s. And that doesn't necessarily mean like I want to have a baby next year, but it's how are you taking steps right now to preserve and improve your fertility? And so that you are in a really good place when you do decide to get pregnant, because the years of prep that you do, in your 20s and 30s are going to impact your fertility journey. And you can start as early as you want by focusing on your hormone health, by focusing on these systems that I talk about. Are you ovulating regularly? Are you paying attention to the signs that your body is giving you? Do you have painful cycles, or do you have, really heavy periods where you're clotting, or are you spotting between cycles? And I think the best place to start is your cycle, because that is literally like your monthly report card for any woman to be able to say, okay, no, that can't be normal. So what is actually going on underneath the surface to see what's impacting my cycle, what's impacting my ovulation? Am I regularly having an ovulatory cycle? If you're on birth control, like find other ways, because you've obviously suppressed your hormone signaling for years. So, are there other methods of contraception that you can use that are not going to be shutting down your system that you might want to consider? And if you are going to get off birth control, do you have a plan of what that looks like? Because coming off birth control after years of being on it, you need a little bit of support and, a protocol to help support your body, because it will go through changes. And it's not just like what the conventional system says, where it's like, when you're ready, just get off birth control and start trying. No, because you're going to have a whole cascade of symptoms after you've shut down your system for so many years that you need to then like awaken your body and kind of train it again to have these hormonal fluctuations and have that healthy hormone signaling, and see how your body reacts to those changes. So the earlier that you can start, the better. On the subject of egg freezing, it's really, case by case. I don't think egg freezing is for everybody. And I think that, again, the earlier that you can start with egg freezing, if you feel like you want to delay having children and you know that that's the case, or there are certain factors in your life where you want to have like a backup plan, I think that that's great. But I think also really doing your research and, again, preparing your body for egg freezing, because you need to prepare your body to make sure that you get the best possible outcome. Because I see it all the time. Women just go into egg freezing without the right preparation, and then they're disappointed with the results, and they have to go through it again and again. It's a toll on the body. So the more prep that we can do and the more foundational elements that we can take care of in our health, the better. And in terms of like what you can start doing today, number one, hands down, is focus on your nutrition, because I see this all the time. This is across the board a problem. Women are under fueling. We're still afraid of eating too much protein, afraid of eating too much carbs, afraid of eating too much fat. And this like constant nutrition noise on social media and, she does it, must be good for me kind of thing. There's so much misconception around nutrition, and we need to build a generation of women that is way more aware of how to truly nourish our bodies. Women are depleted. They are not getting enough food in general. So calorically, women are very, very underfueled. And your body will not prioritize, like unless you're reliably fed, your body thinks you're in a famine. So it doesn't feel like it's safe to conceive, and it will store fat and it will conserve energy. And in that energy will not be put into making a baby. So number one is focusing on your nutrition and not just what you're eating, but what you're absorbing. So the second thing would be to focus on your digestive health. So really focusing on what you're actually absorbing. Are there like digestive issues that you're experiencing? Because a lot of the time what we're seeing is these digestive issues then impact your hormone signaling and your hormones. So it all kind of ties in together. The other thing is like optimizing sleep and making sure you're sleeping properly, hydrating properly, because your cervical fluid and cervical mucus is like the majority of it is water. It's like 90% water. So are you seeing those cervical fluid changes when you're ovulating? Are you hydrating properly on a cellular level? Are you moving your body in a way that helps, maintain muscle mass? Because again, that's huge for your metabolic health. Are you weight training? Are you walking and getting your body's circulation going? Is there healthy circulation? Because that's another thing, like blood flow issues. That causes a lot of, recurrent loss and a lot of cases of women who are having miscarriages because they don't have healthy circulation. So these are some of the things that I would definitely look into. And then nervous system regulation. So we all have stress. We're all leading very stressful lives, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. So how are you creating more resilience within your body and in your everyday life to be able to manage those stressors, but more importantly, understanding what the stressors are in your life? Are they external factors where, you need healthier boundaries, a better work environment, healthier relationships, etc.? Or is it internal stressors like you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you've got blood sugar dysregulation, whatever that is. So it's understanding what is actually stressing you out in your life and taking inventory of that and then sort of managing that. But these are the things, like the foundational things that I would definitely focus on and start with. And if you are someone who is now ready to, start on a fertility journey, the first thing that I would do is get comprehensive lab work, because that is a baseline into what is happening with your overall health. And, I've got free resources where anyone who wants, a more comprehensive look into lab work, I can share that with your audience. But I think that is such an important step and often one that gets missed or delayed. And we can already gather so much data and information around that to be able to say, okay, this is now what I need to work on. These are the supplements I need to take. This is the nutrition I need to focus on. And then you have a much clearer view of what you're doing rather than just like throwing things at your health and your fertility journey, hoping that something sticks. So that's essentially what I would advise.
That's all extremely helpful, but furthermore, it's so eye-opening because there's just so many things that I think people don't think about when they think, oh, I need to get healthier. A lot of people default to just food alone. But one of the things that you mentioned was sleep. And I think that that's often so overlooked, is how much sleep plays a factor. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on today, because you have really shared so much valuable information. Before we go, I just want to ask if there's one mindset shift you wish every woman could walk away with after hearing this conversation, what would it be? And what would you want women to know about their bodies that nobody is telling them?
Well, my hope for women is that they feel more empowered in this space, because we are taking something so sacred and beautiful that a woman is able to do, and we are just shutting it down consistently. And it really takes that power away from a woman to be able, like we have the power to create and nurture and transform and change and do all of these amazing things and bring life into this world. And that's beautiful. And to have someone tell you you can't do it, and your body is broken and there's something wrong with you, that's so disempowering. So I want women to walk away from information like this and be able to truly advocate for themselves, but more importantly, to stop blaming themselves, because it is not their fault. It's just that they haven't had, the care and the support to listen to them and to be able to look at things from a different perspective. And I want women to kind of regain that trust in themselves and listen to their intuition and feel more empowered about their bodies and their health, and know that they can do something that is so innately natural.
I truly love that and couldn't agree more. And I really hope that everybody listening today really understands that this is a true reminder that fertility is not a verdict and it's a conversation with your body, and that you have power and you can do things to change the diagnosis. So, Sandra, before we go, first of all, thank you again for helping men and women everywhere within this important and beautiful phase of life, as you so rightfully said. Please just tell everybody the best way that they can get in touch with you.
Sure. So the easiest way would be on my Instagram, which is at Sandra Sharpe Wellness. And, if you do follow me, I'd love to hear from you if you listen to this episode and what you thought about it. You can also look at my website, sandrasharpewellness.com, and where I have all the information about what I do and how I can help couples all right there, as well as a lot of free resources, which you can, download and use as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you feel empowered from the episode. You can connect with me at supergeneunleashed.com and on Instagram at supergeneunleashed. Please share your thoughts, and I look forward to connecting with you. And until next time, keep on shining and showing the world your super gene.